Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Cultivating Success, your small farm webinar series. My name is Ariel Egenbrod. I'm going to be hosting tonight's webinar. I'll introduce myself in a minute, but I first want to just welcome everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. If you have questions throughout the webinar, you can enter them off to the side column. There's also a place for chat. I'm going to go through a few introductions and some housekeeping to get us started tonight. So are you in the right place? Tonight we're covering marketing in the new food reality, how understanding the way we eat now creates smarter consumers and opportunities for local food-based entrepreneurship. And this is our March 26th webinar. My name is Ariel Egenbrod. I am the Community Food Systems and Small Farms Area Extension Educator for University of Idaho. I'm located in Boise. I serve about 6 counties in southwest Idaho. I also have some statewide projects related to food safety and farm to school. Joining me tonight on the webinar, though she is silent right now, is Colette DePhelps. And many of you may also know her, especially if you've been on earlier webinars. She's going to be helping to run some of the tech in the background. She's also going to be facilitating our question and answer at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions and you're typing them into the chat, she's going to be paying attention to those and making sure that all those questions get answered towards the end. So just a quick introduction. This webinar series is a project of Cultivating Success. Cultivating Success is our sustainable small farms education program. It's a joint venture between University of Idaho Extension and the farm and food nonprofit Rural Roots. So those of you that are in the northern part of the state, you're probably more familiar with Rural Roots than you are in the southern part of the state, but it is an organization that, while it primarily serves the inland Northwest, its membership is open to anyone in the state and in Eastern Washington as well. So just a few tips to help tonight run smoothly. There's always the potential for technical difficulties. I myself am a frequent webinar viewer, and sometimes there just isn't sound, or sometimes the slides aren't viewable. Please, if you have any trouble, write a question or put it into the chat and we will try to address that quickly. Sometimes just logging out, logging back in, making sure that your speakers are set, all of that can sometimes help, though there's always a potential for a problem that we've never had or never anticipated. Some good ideas are to close any programs that you have running on your computer, especially programs that are going to be high bandwidth users. Webinars tend to take up a lot of your bandwidth, so close your other internet browsers, maybe close your email, things like that, anything that might be sending you a push or a notification. Check your sound in your control panel. If you are having a lot of trouble, you might actually call in and use your telephone for the sound. And if you're doing that, then you would mute your computer sound so you don't get feedback. And again, if you have questions, type them into the block on that panel on the left, or on the right of your screen rather, and that would allow us to be able to see them and hopefully try to address a problem that you might be having. And also up in your control panel, you'll see up there you have a few options. We have muted everybody, so you are going to be muted for the duration of the webinar, though you can ask questions silently. There are some buttons over here for different things. We're going to be having some polls throughout the evening, and also there is one handout. So if you're having trouble with the visuals, you might want to click and download the handout, and then at least you're guaranteed to have the slides for later when you want to view them. So the whole slide deck is in a PDF in the handouts over there. So I think we're going to get started. So here's a quote from the Cornell University Research Brief. Most people do not really know why they buy what they buy, eat what they eat, or do what they do. So we're going to talk about whether you think that that is true, whether that applies to you or makes sense to you. What do you think about that? So we're going to find out. So I want you to be watching your screen. I'm going to open up a poll, and you're going to have the opportunity to vote on your answers. And when everyone's done, we're going to look at our cumulative answers, and then we're going to look at some national statistics and see where we fall in these questions. So just really quickly, we are going to be using very highly scientific methods for our polling tonight. We're just to lighten the mood a little bit. I have a very, very technical graph on what you say versus what you mean. So when you say one chip, do you mean actually 2 bags of chips? Most people, that's what they mean. So a lot of the material tonight is going to be kind of fun. And while we're asking for your you to vote on some poll items, you know, we're assuming that you're being honest, but some of these questions it might be hard to be honest about. However, it's anonymous and we don't know who's answering what, so really you can be honest, no judgment. All right, so the first question, and I'm going to get this poll started here in just a second. Do you feel that fresh foods are healthier? So give me just a minute, and I'm going to pull this up. Now what you should see is you should see the poll, and you click yes or no. And what I can see is how many percent of those of you that are on the webinar are voting. Oh, we're at 50% already voted. Excellent. You guys are doing great. So do you feel that fresh foods are healthier? And we'll wait. We may not be able to get to 100% depending on if some people are having trouble with the polling or they can't see it, or maybe they actually went into the kitchen to get chips because now that I mentioned them, that's all that they can think about. So we'll give it another few seconds here to see if everyone has voted. And we've got a number of questions. Looks like we're at about 83%, so maybe that's good. We've been holding steady there. So let's go and see what you all said. Do you feel that fresh foods are healthier? And 100% of those of you that voted said yes. All right, well, how does that play out in national statistics? All right, well, you guys are even ahead of the curve. Nearly 9 in 10 adults, or 87%, according to a 2014 study, feel that fresh foods are healthier. So you guys are right on trend with national averages. And again, a lot of the data that you're going to see in tonight's presentation was all accumulated around 2014. So a lot of this data is pretty cutting edge, and a lot of times you have to pay pretty heavily to get access to it. So by the time they make it available and free, it's been a few years. So it's probably time for me to update some of this in my presentation. I would say that when we're talking about some of the trends that I'm going to mention in here and I show data sets for, I would say that we're probably moving in the same direction, even more so with some of these results. All right, so that was the first poll. 100% of you feel that fresh foods are healthier. So what do you think about taste? So I'm going to open the next one.
So Ariel, just to jump in, the last one was actually, do you believe fresh foods taste better, that people said 100%?
Oh, that's right. Okay, so we're going to go back to the other one then. I'll open this instead. Okay, this is my first time launching the polls. Thank you, Colette. Okay, so the poll that you're seeing now, I'm so sorry, is do you feel that fresh foods are healthier? So we're just going backwards a little bit. And it looks like we're voting. Oh, it looks like everybody that voted the last time is voting. So that means that we're statistically appropriate, right? Okay. So now you can all see, yes, 100% of you feel that fresh foods are healthier, and 100% of you feel that fresh foods or believe that fresh foods taste better. All right, excellent. So now we're on track. 80% of adults do feel that fresh foods are tastier. So again, you guys are right in line with national averages, maybe even more so. And that could be because if you're involved in small farming and local food, you have a lot of access to fresh foods and would feel this way. All right, so let's ask this one. Are you making an effort to choose more fresh foods? And here we go. We're going to launch the correct poll this time. So are you making an effort to choose more fresh foods in your diet? You guys are all really awake and voting super fast, and we even got more voters this time. So perhaps you are just getting the swing of things. Whatever is happening, this is great. So 100% of you voted. 100% of you are making an effort to choose more fresh foods. That is fantastic. Well, let's see, and probably some of you are making an effort to grow more fresh foods as well. So not quite as many nationally. They believe that fresh foods are healthier and taste better, but not all of them are making an effort to include more fresh foods. But 78% of consumers are making a very strong effort to eat more fresh versus processed foods. So you guys are really above average as far as this is concerned. So here's another question for you. So since last Monday, so in the past week, how many times have you eaten a meal alone or by yourself? And again, we've got quite a few options for you. You haven't eaten by yourself at all in the past week, 1 to 3 times, so maybe once a day, more than that, all the way up to probably most of your meals are eaten alone. And again, this isn't meant to be a question that makes you feel sad. We're going to explain a little bit about why we're asking this and look at some of these averages. So it looks like quite a few of you have voted. I'll give you another couple seconds if you're trying to think back, like, how many times have I eaten by myself this week? And I'm trying to think too. It would take me a little bit of time. All right, so 100% of you have voted. So let's see what your responses were. So about 30% of you have eaten alone only 1 to 3 times in the past week. Another 30% of you, 29%, 3 to 5 times. 43% of you have eaten by yourself 5 to 9 times over the last week. And it looks like none of you have eaten every meal alone. That's if you're eating more than 1 meal a day. So that is pretty interesting. Let's see what our national statistics are about. So this is pretty interesting. So nationally, 47%, so almost half of all of our eating occasions are now done alone. And what's really interesting about this, and we'll talk about it later, is that this is not necessarily because people are just alone or living alone. This is people that have families that work in social environments. We're still eating by ourselves quite a bit. And I would say that probably these answers that you've given me is supporting that. Oh, and I think, oh, look, I can share the poll results. Here we go. So now you can all see what I was seeing. All right, I'll let you look at that for a second. So pretty well balanced between 1 to 5 times, and then 43% of you ate alone 5 to 9 times. Okay, I'm going to hide that and move on. By the end of this, I'm going to have the polling down, Colette. All right, so here's another one. Do you eat breakfast? And so your choices are, yes, every day I eat breakfast. Yes, almost every day I eat breakfast. A few times a week, once in a while, or no, I never breakfast. And I don't have an option on here for those of us that might be sort of like hobbits and we like to eat 2 breakfasts. So let's see. All right, we've got 100% of voting. I'm going to close and share with you all. Okay, so 43% of you eat breakfast every day. Another 43% of you, yes, almost every day. 14% of you eat breakfast a few times a week, and none of you are never breakfasters. So everybody is at least eating breakfast sometimes. So that's great. I know that if our nutrition educators were on, they could talk to us about some of the benefits of eating breakfast and why we're supposed to. And I think that the messages have been getting out there. So in 2014, breakfast was eaten at home 5.1 times per week. So this is one of the meals that we are still eating at home more frequently. And as Americans, we are eating breakfast more regularly. And I think that's because we have really been told that breakfast is healthy, that breakfast gets our metabolism going. I eat breakfast because when I wake up, that's all I can think about, but the health benefits are definitely proven about breakfast. So I'm going to close that. All right, so let's move on. Now, this is the one, very, very interesting to see people's responses. And I have a feeling that because you are anonymous on the webinar, you are potentially going to be more honest about this question. So I did ask this question once in a live presentation where my husband was in the audience and people closed their eyes and they had to raise their hand. And I know for a fact that he was lying. He was saying, oh, I maybe have snacks one per day, and he snacks all the time. So be honest. Nobody can see, your answer associated with you. So how many snacks on average do you consume daily? I don't snack at all. Maybe 1 snack, 2 snacks, 3 snacks, 4 or more snacks. We're going to give it a couple more minutes. We've got a few people that haven't voted yet. And I think we'll go ahead and close it and we'll see what you said. And you guys are not super snackers. So let's see. However, none of you don't snack. So everyone is at least a little bit of a snacker. About half of you said that you maybe have 1 snack per day, and another half of you said that you have 2 snacks per day. So that would, depending on when that was, it might be a mid-morning snack and a bedtime snack. It might be a late afternoon snack and a bedtime snack. So that's great. That's not a lot of snacking. Let's see how you guys line up with national averages. We're going to close that. And just remember, half of you are having 1 snack, half of you are having 2 snacks. So you are well below the national average, which is half of adults eat 3 or more snacks per day. So this is in the general US population. Lots of snacking going on. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. All right, so here is, I think we've got 1 or 2 more polls for you. So do you consciously avoid specific foods in your diet? This could be, for example, meat, dairy, eggs, gluten, any kind of artificial colors, flavors, or sweeteners, probably lots of other things that we could put in here, but these are just some suggestions. So this could also be, I choose not to purchase GMOs, or I'm trying to only get milk without hormones, or just anything like that. And it looks like 100% of you so far. Let's see, we're about at 75% of you voting. So think about that. Great, we're almost there. So do you consciously avoid anything in your diet? I think we've got everybody who's going to vote. So let's look at our responses. So we have 83% of you, yes, you are consciously avoiding something out there in your diet. And 17% of you said no, you're not really actively avoiding anything. It may be just part of your diet to not include some of these things, or it could be that you are just, you're just not concerned, you're eating everything. So let's see how we stack up nationally. So 83% of you, yes, you're consciously avoiding something in your diet. 17% of you, you're not consciously avoiding it. And we'll move on here. All right. So in 2014, again, this was the last time that I had access to this comprehensive of the data. So it's been about 4 years, probably time to update and see where we're at. But like I said, it's probably increased. That would be my guess based on what I see in the marketplace, what I see in magazines, and what I hear from consumers. But in 2014, 1/3 of adults were trying some kind of specialty regimen that was primarily an exclusionary diet. So 8% tried gluten-free, 7% were excluding lactose, 6% were trying to have raw or living foods, and 5% went dairy-free. So in this group, you've got 83% of us doing something exclusive. So either we are way beyond the national trend in this category, or this trend has just skyrocketed. So really interesting. That's why it's so much fun to get these questions answered by the specific audience that we're working with. All right, so that was, those were all of the polls. So you can sit back and relax now. You're not going to have to be voting anymore, but I really appreciate your willingness to answer those questions and to be honest. So let's talk a little bit about some other things that might be important to you. So this isn't a poll, but you might just be thinking, you know, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, this, and you could even add to this list. So these are just some different phrases that are often used in marketing food. Some of them have meanings that are very well defined. Some of them have meanings that are not specifically well defined. Some of them are sort of meaningless, really, when you actually look at the definition, but they might have meaning or value to a consumer. So organic, definitely organic food is something that is strictly defined and has a federal definition. Local food, sustainable, natural, real. Maybe affordability is important to you. Maybe packaging is something that really gets you going. Maybe you are in search of authentic or clean food and you define that in a very specific way. You might be looking at the way your food is raised, whether it's crops or animals. And you might be looking at also things like convenience and health. And so, you know, even though this webinar is really targeted at those of you that are perhaps working in small farms or working in small food, you're also consumers. So thinking about what's important to you, and then also thinking about what might be important to your customers and how you are presenting what it is that you produce. So you may use some of these words even in what you're doing now when you market your products. So we're going to go through some of these and talk about some of the ones that really have meaning and some of the ones that are really just being co-opted by anybody who wants to associate them with the inferred value. So let's look at some of the major consumer food trends that are happening. And I would say that these are still definitely important. So we're going to talk about getting fresh. We're going to talk about dining alone, eating early and often, and everything free. So all the questions that we asked you earlier tonight and that we presented the national data, we're going to talk about what all of these things mean and why they're so important to food marketers, food retailers, and potentially to you as a small-scale direct marketer. And then just another one of my highly scientific polls. So this is a bar graph, how good food is that you're eating and what you plan to eat next. And these are what you think about while you're eating. And hopefully you've all had dinner already before the webinar. I had a snack. I'm one of those 3 times or more snackers. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these trends. And fresh is probably the major trend, and it is also the most loosely defined, right? Fresh, you may have in your mind what you think fresh is. And if we were able to ask and answer, you know, and have a discussion right now, if you were all in front of me in a classroom, we would definitely talk about what you think about when you think about fresh. And when I've given this talk to live audiences, they say things like produce. So fresh refrigerated foods, something that's not been processed, something that has never been frozen. Some people say frozen is fresh. So there really is not a definition of fresh, except that it just sounds awfully good, doesn't it? And you all said that 100% of you said that fresh foods were healthier and tasted better. But I would imagine that not all of you have the same definition of what fresh is. So in the U.S. grocery market, fresh would be everything that is, you know, perishable, not and possibly even frozen. But 29% of all grocery sales are now coming from fresh foods. And your premium grocery stores or your, your market style grocery stores are really looking at fresh, ready-to-eat foods. And these were expected to have the highest growth rate through 2018. So That's now. And I think about in all of the markets that I shop in, whether it is a co-op or a large grocery store or a national chain or a superstore, what do you see when you walk in the door on the grocery side? You're immediately bombarded with display cases full of fresh, ready to go, ready to eat, prepackaged salads, vegetables, fruits, meals, beverages, all of this. They are putting so much money and effort into this fresh market approach. And so we're buying more fresh ready to eat, we're buying more fresh snacks, and we're buying more fresh foods and fresh ingredients. So this is really a big effort and big business for retailers of all shapes and sizes. They're also using the word fresh in every possible marketing angle they can. So not only in the food itself, but in the way that it might be minimally or lightly processed, right? So in 2013, 1 in 5 of the best-selling new foods or drinks introduced were touting a fresher flavor claim, right? So the flavor is fresh. That doesn't necessarily even mean that the food is fresh, just that the flavor is fresh. And then they're looking too at different technologies. So cold pressing, cold brew, high pressure, anything for creating some premium markets for juices, coffees, and oils to make them seem fresher. So however you interpret fresh, somebody is marketing to you. So that's fresh. The next one is when we talked about dining alone, right? So nearly half of all of those eating occasions, right? So that would be a meal or a snack, are happening alone, and that's even in multi-person households. So even if you live with a family, you might be eating almost half of your meals by yourself. When we look at some of the demographics of American households, this is really interesting. You know, we tend to think of like the family is the target customer, but the reality is that two-person married coupled households without children at home and single people living alone are the two largest U.S. household units. So part of this is not just that people aren't having children, because people are definitely having children, but if baby boomers are becoming our largest demographic, we've got a lot of empty nesters. So people whose children have left the home or people that do not have children living at home. And then single people. It's much more common to find single people living alone longer and longer into life or permanently or choosing to live alone for whatever reasons. These are just the two largest household units. And so if you look at that from a food trends perspective, then foods that can be easily portioned or that are packaged for smaller households are going to be likely to gain in popularity. To me, this does not explain Costco, though, or the fact that it is just always jam-packed out there. And I see people that I know are just a two-person household shopping at Costco, and I have a really hard time knowing how we would eat some of that food. But even there, if you go, you'll see smaller portioned packages, you just get 10 of them, right? So looking at these easily portioned or packaged foods, and then also looking at sales of kid-specific meals. This is another area where a lot of rise has been anticipated. And so this might be too that if you're eating by yourself or you're eating alone and then it's time to feed the kids are also getting their own meal that may not be a family meal. So this is just really quick example, you know, just of all the different sort of facets where this is coming into play. And one is, you know, like here at this fast food restaurant, you can customize your child's meal, right? You can feel better about the corn dog because you add apple slices to it or a juice or a milk or something, right? But this is really targeting that this is a kid-specific meal. The kid has choices, and it's a custom meal, and it has some fresh options. See the fresh in there? There you go. The other one on the other side, so this is just something that you might find if any of you are on Pinterest or you're on Facebook or other social media. Lots and lots and lots of recipes out there for single serve, right? So you're cooking for one. This is 10 simple recipes for a party of one. So again, that demographic of the single or the couple with no children at home is really growing in popularity. All right, so snacks. This group on this webinar are not big snackers. We identified that. But we have grown from snacking about 1.9 snacks per person per day in 2010 to 2.8 snacks per person per day in 2014. And I would be willing to wager money that that number has grown. And like we said, half of adults eat 3 or more snacks per day, except for all of you. You are eating 2 or fewer snacks per day. So what does this mean for the rest of us snackers, though? Snacks are huge, and the idea of healthy snacks or fresh snacks is really exploded. So everything from little self-serve hummus. I see self-serve, like single-serving Nutella samples by the checkouts. And when you look at the number of pre-portioned, pre-packaged snacks, like small bags of baby carrots, or these are still, a lot of these things on this picture, these are still chips or crackers or candies or cookies, but they are packaged in a way to seem like they are healthier or fresher. There's a lot of, protein snacks out there. Everything is really being shrunken down so that it's easy to grab and go and consume. So you get that convenience, that ability to snack as a meal by yourself. All of that is part of the marketing and the presentation. And by the way, some of these images that I'm showing, this is just a Google search for healthy individual snacks, and you just get hundreds, if not thousands, of images. So that can give you a clue as to where we're headed. All right, talking a little bit about the food restrictions, right? So when we're choosing to omit certain things from our diet for a number of reasons, 1 in 10 shoppers are now actively seeking to avoid something in their diet, whether it's milk or gluten or dairy or wheat or sugar or egg. It could be because of life-threatening allergies or illnesses. It could be a dietary choice based on health. It could be something that you're choosing based on your values about how that food is produced or what implications that food has on the global environment or economy. Lots and lots of myriad reasons why we might be choosing to avoid certain kinds of foods in our diet. And I think the reasons are probably as varied as the choices. So just another one of these Google searches for gluten-free comes up with this. I mean, this is just one page of probably dozens of different gluten-free examples or gluten-free logos that are on products. So this is huge business. Everything from traditional things like bread and snacks to throwing a gluten-free logo on things that never contain gluten in the first place. You do need to watch out for some of that advantageous marketing. And I know from some friends who are extremely gluten sensitive that just because it says gluten-free doesn't always mean that it has been certified or actually really tested, and is not always a reliable mark of it being gluten-free. So something to think about too. So here are some other trends that are on their way or already here, depending on where you live. Depending on where you live in Idaho, some of these might still be kind of far out ideas. Other of them, like say when you're living in Boise, these have been around for a long time and they're not going anywhere. So some of the mainstreaming trends in food, we've got global pellets, whole hog, food with a story. So sophisticated shortcuts, making it easier to do the right thing, and then really real, natural, organic, sustainable, and beyond. And we're going to talk about each of these really quickly. And this is where I think that especially as small farmers, ranchers, direct marketers of local food, you have got the advantage. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. All right, so first of all, the global pellets. And I realize that it's funny that I just talked about your local food advantage, and then now we look at Lay's potato chips. But this is just an example. So every couple of years, the Lay's company comes out with a number of different flavors. Sometimes they're chosen by customer submissions of what they want to taste. This past round, I think, was based on international flavors. So you have Indian tikka masala, Greek tzatziki, Chinese Szechuan chicken, and Brazilian picana. These are all potato chips that are flavored with these flavors of the world. So We are definitely seeing an upswing in ethnic flavors, in the availability of them, in the desire for consumers to explore them. And again, this isn't everywhere and this isn't all consumers, but in general, the American palate is expanding and the American palate likes spicy too. So that's something that's really happening. So the next one is that food with a story, right? We want the whole hog. We want to know everything we can about our food. And we're not just buying food, we're buying its history, its past, present, and future. And if anyone is a fan of the television show Portlandia, it's a sketch comedy. It really finds all the things in our culture and makes fun of them. But this was one of my favorite sketches. But they go out to dinner and they ask about the chicken. Is the chicken local? And she says, oh, yes, it is. It's from a farm nearby. And they're like, well, tell us more about this chicken. And so she comes up with a biography of the chicken, a headshot, talking about where the chicken was raised, what kind of life it had, what it did before it became chicken dinner. And they say, you know, we're so interested. We want to go even further. We want to go to this farm. And so they go to the farm and they meet the farmers and they end up staying, I think, for like 5 years or something. But pretty ridiculous. But this is really what consumers a lot of times are looking for. They want to know, what is the backstory of this food? And there has also been much more of an interest to eat more of the animal. So, and again, this trend may not be in every city or or every community, but the interest in some of the different parts of the animal. So looking at things like liver again, or wanting to explore some of the things that might have been considered awful or waste in years past are being embraced by chefs and being really explored by them. And even if you watch television shows like Top Chef and Iron Chef and some of those, you're seeing ingredients being used that in the past we would have maybe considered them to be not what we wanted to eat, or maybe they were dog food. But now definitely embracing, everything from beef cheeks to lamb liver to kidneys to things like that. So really looking at that. And if you're a livestock producer too, are you throwing these away, or are you diverting these to another source when you actually might have customers that want some of these things? And even the dog food, people are wanting local meat for some of their pets in some of the really high market areas. All right, so let's talk a little bit about convenience. So is convenience cheating? Not necessarily. And I think a lot of consumers, busy urban consumers, busy parents, are looking at how they can eat healthy and still get dinner on the table in half an hour or something. So they're looking at things like home delivery, which now even the biggest grocery store chains are offering this as a service. And we're not just talking about the Whole Foods Amazon connection, but even our local Albertsons stores, our Kroger, Fred Meyer, Walmart here in the Treasure Valley, they're all offering home delivery services. I think even Costco has a call ahead and then come pick it up option. So this is being really embraced by all the big guys. People are looking into recipes and food by mail. So you may have heard of things like Blue Apron, some of these other entities where people are ordering meal kits online. They come fresh to the doorstep with all the ingredients pre-portioned, and people just assemble them. And I put drone drop food because we're all thinking that maybe is the future, right? You order your food on Amazon and it's dropped at your house in an hour. A little bit scary to think about, but we do have to be aware that this is all moving really, really quickly, and I think people are obsessed with this convenience. So this is just an example from Blue Apron. So you just get this lovely meal kit with everything you need in there. There are some companies like this that specialize in organic or sustainable foods. And I've even heard that sometimes Blue Apron in particular is sourcing some of their products on a local or regional basis, depending on where they're located. So this is really an interesting development. And again, I'm going to talk about how you might be able to appropriate some of this when you're a small scale direct marketer. So let's talk a little bit about those trends too. So the natural, organic, sustainable, and real. So some of those words are defined, and primarily that's organic. The rest of those words are entirely up to the consumer to interpret and the marketer to define. But in 2014, 29% of consumers bought more local foods and beverages, 28% bought more organic products, 25% more natural foods, and 23% more non-GMO offerings. So that's at least a quarter or more of consumers choosing some of those products at least some of the time. So that's huge. And that's partly why you'll notice in every grocery store, just about in an urban setting or suburban setting, you're going to find those options, at least the natural, non-GMO, and organic. Still not nearly enough local food in our markets. 3 in 10 also made a strong effort to consume more minimally processed whole foods. So these are good numbers for us. And the reason why that is because everybody is using this as a marketing technique. So everyone from Whole Foods, right? So they're Whole Foods, that's in their name, and they've actually trademarked Eat Real Food, right? And again, what is real food compared to not real food? We're all going to have a different definition of what we think real food is. And just to show you that this is not defined, so Whole Foods has trademarked Eat Real Food. Tyson Chicken is using it in their marketing as well. Keep it real, keep it Tyson. So again, like I said, this is up to the marketers to define and the consumers to interpret. And the more I guess the more susceptible a consumer is to marketing and messaging, the more confused they're probably going to become, because they're just not going to know what is Whole Foods real, is Tyson Chicken real, what is real, okay? This is the thing, guys, you are real. Those of you that are farming and ranching and direct marketing your products, you are the real deal. And you have the story to back it up, you have the farm to back it up, and you know, you've got the presence in your communities. So this is one thing that others can claim, but you really own it. You own the real, you own the local, and if you're not promoting that, if you are not capitalizing on that, then you are really missing out on some of the most powerful messaging that you can have. So whether you're selling produce, whether you're selling meats, prepared foods, whatever it is that you are growing and selling or that you want to grow and sell, you are the real deal. You are the local, right? And so our farmers markets are really promoting that. It's really in your best interest to promote that for yourselves as well. I just love some of these farmers. Okay. So if this kind of stuff interests you and you want to learn more about it, and you also want to learn some really, really interesting consumer information, the Cornell Food and Brand Lab, this is just, you can get lost on here. And I have the web address right there. Lots and lots of consumer studies about the way that people are influenced to shop, the way that they're influenced to eat, and then some really interesting things that you can do to be a smarter consumer and potentially a smarter marketer. So everything about like how food habits and food choices can lead to disregarding food safety announcements, to placement of advertising on grocery store shelves or grocery store carts even. And just about the way that we choose food and the way that we interact and engage with food and the way that we are really susceptible to influence. I really found some fascinating stuff on this website, and I would encourage you to go and check it out and to learn a little bit about how the big guys are using this information to sell their products and to shape marketing decisions. And that same information, the food psychology, is available to you also to use in shaping your markets and reaching customers. So that's food psychology at Cornell. So we're talking about our consumer, right? How can they use all of this information? They're being bombarded by it from a number of different places. You might think as a consumer, you could use this information to maybe be more discerning, to ask more questions, to really do your research and see if a claim is valid or if it's just a marketing term. But as a small scale farmer or rancher, how can you use this information? And this is really the focus of the webinar tonight. So thinking about all the things that we talked about, the fact that people are eating alone, they're eating in smaller households, they are eating breakfast, they are looking for food with a story, they're looking for global flavors, they're looking for convenience, they're looking for a way to make the right choice and make it easily. They're looking for food that is authentic, that is real in however they describe it. They're looking for food that is fresh, however they define that. And they are still very much looking for organic food, natural food, and local food. And I really believe that while the mass marketers can meet a lot of the demand for organic just because they can buy big and they can sell it cheap, but they can't really supply the local. They're just not set up for that business model. So, even though I see a sign at my local Fred Meyer saying this is a local product, I'm like, well, that product is actually coming from Western Washington, so it's regional, but it's not what I would consider or call local for my personal definition of local. So a farmer in my county or a few counties over who's growing and selling in my community, to me, that is local. And that's never going to be available at a big box store in the kind of quantities that really make a difference. At least not yet. It would be fantastic if we could get to that point. But right now, local is, I think, really the domain of the smaller scale producer who direct markets their product. So how else can you use this information? I hope that you're thinking about this. But I want to make sure that you realize that this is, while these are national trends and they may be in effect where you live, depending on where you're coming from and where you grow and market, it may not be that this is going to be in every market. So you do need to research your market, right? Who are your customers? Are they sophisticated? Do they have the kinds of resources to spend on food? What are they really looking for and what's important to them? Are they looking for affordability and quality and to support their neighbors? Are they looking for new flavors? Are they looking for healthy choices for their kids? So look, listen, learn, ask questions. However you need to do that, whether you take a season to work at farmers market or to work with another grower, interview. You could use a lot of different methods to do some customer reconnaissance before you do anything, especially if you're considering maybe a big change or a big new product or something like that. You can do customer surveys, you can do product testing, you can do focus groups. You can do that at a farmer's market sometimes. However you have access to people, and your extension educators might be able to help you with some of that too in terms of assembling a group or finding someone to do some of this research with you. And then really honestly analyze your findings. If it comes back that people just are not really going to buy your product enough to make it worth your while, or if they give you really honest feedback on something, be ready to accept that feedback and say, okay, this was a great idea that I had. This is a great product. It might just be not right for this community or for this time or for this market. So be flexible and willing to make adjustments and not just be so in love with your idea that it's going to, you're going to let that drive you even if it's not successful. So really think about where you stand. Know who your customer is. Know what they buy. Are they influenced by some of these national trends? And if they are, what are they looking for that you could provide? What are they buying? How often are they buying it? And at what price? So you think about those things that are the essentials, things that people are eating every day. And for a lot of people, that's things like dairy products and eggs. And fruits and things like that. And then And then there might be things that they're consuming multiple times a week. So their salad greens or their proteins. Um, and then what things are really a specialty item that maybe they buy once in a while or that lasts a long time. So thinking about some of the growers that and food producers that I work with, somebody that produces mustard, well, somebody might just buy one jar of their mustard per season, or maybe two, or maybe a few more if they're giving a gift. Same with somebody that sells honey. They might sell honey to a customer once a month or every 2 months. So really thinking about how wide you're going to cast your net so that whatever you're selling, you're going to be selling enough of it to keep you going. And is your community ready and willing to support your farm and your product mix? Are you too ahead of the curve, or are you behind the curve, or are you just right hitting it with what your customers are looking for and what they can afford and what they need? And then too, a lot of you are going to have competition. So who else might be meeting that demand? Is it a big box store? Is it another farmer? Is it another market? Be aware of who else out there is potentially meeting that need and really look for your niche. We like to see healthy competition, but we don't want to see a bunch of farmers in the same area all trying to do the same thing and then getting really frustrated, or then trying to outcompete each other. I think there's room for everyone to find their niche. So this is really important. And this is not meant to be the kind of question like, well, what makes you so special? No, this is what makes you special. You are all special. And how good are you at telling that story and at defining that for your farm and for your customers? You all have something really unique to share about the way you farm, why you farm the way you do, the history related to your farm, the future of your farm. So using all of these to convey that to the customer and to sell that authenticity and that realness. Because you're not making it up. You're not using it as a marketing ploy. You live it every day. So share that as much as you can. It doesn't mean you have to have everyone out to your farm. And certainly we wouldn't recommend that necessarily. But how can you share your farm story a little bit? How can you let them have a little bit of a peek into it? Maybe it's just even having a picture of your animals and, what their name is, not necessarily when you're selling meat, but maybe just if you have a farm animal and you've just got some stories that you're telling about your farm. It really resonates and connects with a lot of consumers, and especially their families. So think about what makes you special and tell that story. Don't let that opportunity slip past you. So that's really all I had. Some other things that I wanted to just make sure that you thought about were, especially in terms of thinking about the convenience for people. This could be in the way that you sell. So like the portions that you're selling, if you're pre-packaging your produce or you're bagging it or whatever, or even if you're selling at farmers market, making it appealing to someone that might be shopping for themselves or only for themselves and one other person. Thinking about possibly kid-friendly options, especially if you sell at farmers market. It's such a family event. Having, this picture, for example, reminds me that I've seen also people selling berries even in just like a Dixie cup size, for $1 for a little thing of cherries, and parents swarm over that stuff. Like, oh, well, we've got to get this little thing of cherries, and while we're here, we might as well get a big bag of cherries too, because we're going to want to eat these later. So think about things like that. It's not necessarily like ready to eat, quote unquote, but it's something that they could eat right away, and it's in that sort of accessible portion. Also thinking about how to market, when you're thinking about like those food delivery or food kit services, how could you do something like that at farmers market? Could you collaborate or team up with another grower who might be growing or raising animals or livestock or cheese, and have a dinner kit of sorts, or have a dinner club at the farmers market where you get the stew meat here and you get your vegetables here, and then you pick up your herbs and then your bottle of wine, and you've got your whole dinner. And really think about how you could connect with your fellow growers in order to make those sorts of things available to your customers, where you are, where they don't have to buy that on the internet, where they don't have to call ahead to the grocery store. So it could make some differences too in how you distribute your CSAs or how you do market sales. I think there's a lot of room for creativity out there. You don't want to make it too hard for yourselves. And if you're going to add, a new service or something, try it on a really small scale. Give it a test run. See if it's something that you can actually manage. The last thing we want is to make more work for you. We want everybody, ourselves included, to work smarter, not harder. But so these are just some ideas based on these trends that I'd be really interested to see what you might come up with. In processing this information and thinking about your own farms. So I'm going to have Colette come back on and we'll see if we've got any questions. And if you have questions that you've been thinking of throughout the webinar, go ahead and type those in now and we will try to get them answered.
Okay, great. Thank you for that great presentation, Ariel. Right now, we don't have any questions, so we'll just give it a second to see if anybody has any questions that come up for them.
And Colette, do you have any questions or anything that came up in your mind as you were listening to this webinar?
Well, I was really interested in the psychology uh, of food and branding and the messaging that we have as we're talking about telling these stories and this authenticity. And, that we are really seeing that in the landscape and seeing how people um, are differentiating themselves in not only in terms of themselves as a farmer, but also as maybe a small food processor or as a restaurant or retail outlet. So what I was really struck by are the ability to create community around these stories and build that local food system through that exchange.
Yeah, great point. All right, did we get a question?
We do have a couple questions. One says, several of the slides were not in the handout. Can you mail them?
Oh, I wonder what was missing. I wonder if I had an animation on a slide if it didn't get included. I will double check that and we can email that out to all the participants. And if we have your addresses, we can send it. But I probably would just email it to all the participants. And I have the handout, so I'll look at that and I'll compare it to the PowerPoint and I'll make sure that everything is included in there. So thanks
Great.
for pointing that out.
Amanda says that email will be fine, and she said thank you, that it's a great presentation.
All right, well, thank you, Amanda.
Are there any other questions?
All right, well, I'm going
Well,
to
we don't
just
have any other questions, Ariel.
Okay, well, so before you get off really quick, I'm just going to finish up the webinar then. We've just got a couple slides, it's sort of some housekeeping. So just to let you know that the Cultivating Success website is your one-stop shop for your sustainable small farms education in Idaho. And this is where we will list any upcoming classes, any additional webinars, programs, resources available to you. This is a really wonderful website if you're not already familiar with it. I encourage you to visit it and to check back often for updates and upcoming events. We do have more webinars scheduled throughout the rest of spring. Our next one, everyone's going to love this one, Are You Making Money? And that's going to be Monday, April 16th. Same time, same place. You'll want to register for that ahead of time so that you get the login information. And we will be, I'm not exactly sure how this works, Colette, you'll have to share again. We do have a post-webinar survey so that you can let us know how you're liking the webinars. If any of this information was useful to you or you plan to do something with it, we would love it if you would fill out that, that post-webinar survey.
And that survey will launch automatically at the end of the webinar. So it'll pop up on your screen with a link, and it's really simple to take. And we also have an opportunity in that survey for you to let us know how we could improve this webinar, and certainly let us know if there's other topics you would like to have covered in future webinars.
Okay, yes, great. So that'll pop up, and we are finished a little bit early tonight, so that gives you lots of time to do the post-webinar survey if you were thinking that you were going to be on for another half an hour. And so just to let you know, if you are in southern Idaho and you would like to get a hold of me, here is my contact information. I'm at the Ada County Extension Office in Boise. And like I said, Colette DePhelps is my northern Idaho counterpart, and we also have fantastic extension faculty and support around the state. So just about no matter where you are, we can find someone fairly close to you to help you with some of these things at a local level. So that's all I had. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. I wish that I could have talked to you directly and seen you all, but I really appreciate you hanging on in there. And if you have any questions, let us know later. So thank you so much and good night.
Thank you, Ariel. Good night, everyone.